I made a massive mistake when I named this company because I called this dyslexia in adults because I was struggling with my dyslexia. But what I didn't know at the time is that all of the neurodiversities overlap. So I've subsequently been diagnosed with ADHD, and Katie also is the most delightful cocktail of lots of different neurodiversities. And it's only since learning about these things have I understood them. Hey, I'm Natalie, and welcome to the Dyslexia in Adults podcast. I believe that dyslexia is holding you back in your career and impacting your daily life, and ultimately slowly chipping away at your confidence. And I just simply don't think that that is good enough. I don't care when you were diagnosed, if your boss is a total dick, or if, like me, you roll your eyes heavily when dyslexia is called a superpower. I know I can change how you feel about your brain. Now, today we're going to be talking about memory and how Katie has an unbelievably terrifyingly good memory. It's really unnerving. And I'm going to start the podcast by saying that Katie told me not to shit on myself too much. So I'm going to say that my memory could be better. I think is a fair starting point.
That's polite enough. I'll let it pass this time. I'll let it pass this time. You gotta call me out though too, because I know I'm gonna do the same thing. So welcome to Memory Month, everyone. Um, I want to talk about you before we dive into this uniqueness. Where do you say there's overview. There's long-term memory, short-term memory, working memory, like processing memory, like there's all different kinds of memories within your brain. I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me. Where do you feel like your strengths and weaknesses are when it comes to memory?
Okay, so I know that I have a not great working memory. It's not, I've seen weaker and it's not the worst, but it's obviously shockingly like not great. And then I really struggle with my long-term memory. So like once something gets to about 5 years, it just feels like it falls off a cliff. It's somewhat unnerving. But the one thing that I will actually say is that my kind of medium term memory is actually really good. And I was kind of, when you said to me just now, you're like, okay, I need you to not be really horrible about yourself. I was like, oh, oh no. And I remember, whenever we are talking about dyslexic people and how they're this like encyclopedia at the work because they kind of look at things, research things, kind of remember things, learn things differently. I've always been that in workplaces. I can always tell you where the file is stored. I can always tell you kind of who's working on what project. I used to be an account manager and I would work in a team of 20 people and I could tell you everyone's portfolio. If someone came up to me, asked me a company, I'd be like, oh, you need to speak to Laura. I always knew things like that.
So I wonder where we should get a memory person on the podcast. I wonder where that sits in the sphere of things because I have the same ability. Like, I very routinely would know who to go to for what, and then also the processes of how like things worked. So I worked in marketing at a company and I knew how the sales flow worked even though it had nothing to do with me. Like I didn't touch it. I just knew. Like I paid attention, I asked questions, and I kind of figured that out. So we talked about it at work, but how does that affect you in your daily life? Like what's when you're sitting down and you're like, okay, here's my number one day-to-day memory challenge outside of work. What would you say it is?
Just forgetting where I've put things down is the one that kind of causes me the most shame. So I was on the I was on this work call the other day with Amy, our other employee. It was early in the morning because Amy's a freakish early bird. And I was like hunting for my ADHD medication and I had no idea where it was. And honestly, it could have been anywhere. And I was like ranting and raving about the fact that I couldn't find this medication. And she was like trying to like tell me about some updates on her projects. And I just couldn't find it and was getting really frustrated about the fact that I couldn't find it. Or, constantly losing and finding my keys again. Stuff like that really is a big frustration for me.
Yeah. I I have solved that problem for myself 90% of the time, and this is a two-part like tip. So I've solved this in that the things that I routinely lose, I create common dumping grounds for them. Like,
Common dumping grounds is really helpful. I also often have multiples. So, in my house in London, I have like 6 or 7 sets of keys. Because I'm just like
yes,
constantly finding and losing, finding and losing. Then I kind of also have a couple of sets of headphones as well. So stuff like that where I'm like needing to leave the house and I'm just frantically trying to search for something. I'm pretty good at that.
I have an incredible visual memory. So I have this, I think it's both dyslexia and autism. That's probably like the culmination of this. But I will be able to visualize where something is. And even if I don't know the exact like object necessarily, because it's usually object based, I can remember the things around it and then it'll trigger where it is. So I'll be like, oh, I know I've seen that. There was a blue cup by it. So it's like a almost like if you have a Where's Wally or Where's Waldo being really, really, really zoomed in, I can see the things around Waldo, and then I just have to be like, oh, that blue cup, it was in the pantry on the, so you just like slowly zoom out. Do you have that where you can like visually see things, or is it does not work for you?
I was thinking about that when you were saying that. I was like, why does that not feel like it works for me? I think a lot of the time, what I'm realizing since being on medication more is that I was really struggling with needing more stimulation and like more interest. So if I'm like coming into the house, I'm probably like either like scrolling on TikTok, watching a like watching something, listening to a voice note, listening to a podcast, sending a voice note. I'm kind of regularly doing like 3 or 4 things at once. So I'm not consciously like looking around, placing my keys down, and then kind of looking at what else is going on around them. What I will say, and I'm just gonna need a rant. I'm just gonna need a small moment to rant. And that is, as like an ADHD person, you put your bank card down somewhere completely random, but you've clocked it. You know where it is. You've seen it, and then people move it, and you're like, I knew it was in the bathroom. I remember seeing it in the bathroom. Why did you move it? And they think they're doing me a kindness, and they are not. Drives me up the wall. Why my bank card is in the bathroom is really none of their business. Just leave it be.
I have the same visceral hatred of this, and it drives me up. I love my partner. I love my family. They are all wonderful. But as a child, even as a small child, my poor sister, my poor, poor, poor sweet sister, she's 5 years older than me. She would come over to we have a separated family. She would come to our house and she would help and she would clean my room for me, which is just the sweetest, most generous, most loving thing. But she
Absolutely
would
not.
move.
No,
She'd move all my shit. She'd move
mm,
all of it.
it's
All of it. I'd be
unacceptable.
like, no, I'd be like, my Barbies were right here. And she'd be like, oh, I put them away. And I'd be like, I don't know where the fuck away is.
Yeah,
I don't know. Away was in the dollhouse when they were like that's how it works, bestie. Like, so
that bank card story, I swear to you, it is from when I was at university in my second year at university. I was 19. I'm now 32. I'm not over that they moved my bank card.
okay, I'm glad it is not just me. I'm glad it's not just me. Like, kills me. So I want to kind of like jump back to something. You said that you have like a 5 year back memory. I was
Mm,
thinking about this in preparation for this podcast. I think mine is like high school, middle school. So I'm mid 30s now, 34. Thanks. I know, looking great. Um, and I want to
plug to watch the
say
YouTube guys if you want to check out Katie's skin.
it's very, very funny.
Yeah.
So I'm 34, and as I get older, I used to remember more about middle school, and now I'm remembering way less. And it's mainly like pictures. If I have a physical picture of something, I can remember it. But as I move into older age, is the tail end of my life, like it just keeps shrinking. And I don't know why, but it's just how it is. And again, we should probably like I'm gonna make friends with somebody who's like a neuro memory biology expert because I have big questions. But um, I just think it's so interesting that it's not like just a me experience or just a you experience. It's a pretty common experience, it sounds like.
Katie,
Um,
the questions that I have is why is your memory so good? Like, you need to stop telling us that you want to ask other people questions and just fess up the secrets, okay? Because you are like unbelievably talented at remembering stuff. Like, it's verging on obnoxious. I'm gonna level with you. It's verging on obnoxious. So just fess up some of the secrets.
well, so when a mommy and a daddy love each other, they make a kid that has autism. That's that's the secret. No, 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 that's not the secret. So a lot of it is part of me lives my life in a narrative. So I don't have an internal narrator. I know some people do. That's narrating my life, but when I can tie something to a story, I can remember it really, really, really easily. And then part of being autistic is that black and white thinking, like loving a good rule. And so I feel like when I have conversations with people, like a great example is us, right? We'll make a decision about something that's going to happen in 3 months from now. And I remember it because it's a rule. We are launching this on this
Mm.
date. That is a rule, steadfast. And then
Mm.
in 3 weeks, when you come up to me, you should see Natalie's face right now. In 3 weeks, when you come up to me and you'll be like, "Ooh, can we launch this in February
Mm.
instead?" And I'll be like, no, we've already made this choice. I already have a rule in mind. That's the way it is. It makes me obnoxious in multiple fronts, but
You know, I thought this episode would be a call out for you, not a call outs for me. It was like the way that conversation started. I was like, I know the way this is finishing. I was
yeah.
like, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah, look, it's a handful of things, right? So it's like a cocktail of ways of remembering. So it's living life in stories. So I often will create a narrative around something and that will help me remember it, especially if I need to remember it. Mind you, I do remember the most random stuff. The most random stuff.
And
We
that's what's
before this
terrifying
podcast.
about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Here's here's like Katie level pro tip. I don't control the memory. The memory controls me. That seems like a line from like a movie. Um, I don't control the memory. The memory controls me. So a good example is we were talking about this before the podcast like actually started about how I had a memory pop into my head last night from when I was in like second grade. My mother-in-law's in town and she was talking about um Jewish food and cooking it and that sort of stuff. And no one in our like direct family is Jewish. And she was talking about it and I was like, I don't think oh, I have. Like, she triggered the memory of the time in second grade when I was obsessed with Judaism and made latkes for my class.
You're so cute.
Why? I know. I mean, I've always been like a big giver, but um, yeah. So, like, I don't control the memory. So, a lot of times you and I'll be talking and you'll be like asking me a memory based question. What did we decide to do for XYZ? And then I'm sitting there like, okay, that was a meeting. It was a meeting we had on a Thursday, so that was our one-on-one. It was let me go I can go look at the notes because we left notes, but if I
And that's
remember
what I'm saying. You're like a
correctly,
bloodhound. She'll search on our Notion. She'll be like, I have this memory of writing it down, and I remember what it looks like, and I can remember this, and da da da. And it's like a bloodhound. And then she'll like search it out on Notion, and she's like, ah, it's here. We da 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 da. And you're like, how? How did you possibly remember that? That's freakish. It's just so impressive.
it's it's like mental snapshots. I have these little pictures in my brain. And like again, like I said, like with the physical objects, a good example, we probably over 8 months ago came up a list of topics for events for the Hive. Join the Hive if
Oh
you're not a
yeah,
member, it's great.
that was so impressive as well.
Like 8 months ago. And so we were trying to decide topics for like the next round of events. And we were like really stumped. We were like, oh, we got two, we need four. And I was like, we have a document. We have a document we created that has a whole bunch of ideas. Let me go look for it. And I don't know why I remembered we had it. Well, I mean, also I hate doing double work. So maybe that was like the secret there is I just didn't want to do double work of coming up with more
And
ideas.
lo and behold, she had dyslexia and memory in there. And I was like, oh, I know so many people struggle with memory. Like, that is a great topic. So that's why you're listening to this. I think the one thing that I have learned is that if you need to remember something for myself in terms of that more ADHD presenting, is I need to really be present. I need to make sure that I'm not kind of checking into another conversation, thinking about something else, worrying about the way that a cloth feels on my leg. I need to know that I'm present, focused, and regulated. And then I've got about a 10% chance. But without all of those.
See, that's the not niceness. No, no, no. It's definitely higher than that, Natalie. Like
Mm.
especially when because it happened you get me sometimes. You get me sometimes. Don't like let's not sell you short. It's not 10% for you. It's definitely more. It's just it's not the minute details that you remember. You're like I mean, big picture thinking, definitely one of your strengths. And so you'll remember a whole conversation we had, but it's just the topic. You'd be like, we had a conversation about doing XYZ. And I'm like, we did. And then you give me slightly more detail, and I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, here's this very specific piece of information. Again, we're the yin to each other's yang.
I was going to say, I think the one thing that people should just take away from this podcast is everyone has ADHD should just have an autistic friend. Like you need an autistic business partner. You need an autistic best friend. It is the best. It is like everything. I don't know how much you get out of it, but I'm thriving.
Okay, it's also the worst. Like, we both know I do not do well with change. So, like, when you do want to change a rule that we set 6 months ago, girl, you know I am gonna absolutely be a terror.
But I need it. I need it. And the other thing I wanted to kind of say and ask you about is obviously, we're talking about your more like minute detail memory of more that kind of feels a little bit more on the autistic side, but you're kind of first and foremost, I think you would consider yourself as dyslexic. So what is your kind of dyslexic approach to memory? Because you are a really visual person.
It is 110% visual memory, visual memory, visual memory. Like, I I remember things through teaching. I remember things through song. I remember things through visuals. I think the only way I made it through university without accommodations is relying on those tools. Like I took a anatomy and physiology class that I didn't need to take. Don't worry about it. And I know to this day can name every bone in the arm because I have a song for it. I can remember the notes on the board in my History 101 class because of the way the teacher laid it out. Like I can see them. So it's those kinds of like doing things in a visual way or in something that sticks, right? My mother actually taught me this. Shout out to Wendy, love you. My mom actually taught me this when I was a kid, is when I was learning to spell, was breaking things down into smaller chunks. Love a good chunk. So like police in America, it's spelled pole ice. And I mentally could connect that to, oh, like when you get arrested by the cops, like it's like being iced, right? Like chained to a pole, right? So it was like pole ice, Police. I think that's how you spell it. Police. Doesn't
No,
matter.
I don't think there's an E in there.
So
I
it's
think it's I think it's
Police.
police. No? Yeah,
Pole
but
ice.
this is not we're never professing to be we're
Great at
never
spelling?
professing to be good at spelling. I do think you're worse at spelling than me though.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Although I had it better because your girl pays for Grammarly Premium.
Yeah.
Grammarly, you want to sponsor us? Just give us a shout out.
Yeah, that's hard yes. So I think one of the couple of the things I've noticed that you do with regards to kind of creating that visual memory is you put lots of little kind of icons or images on our Notion board. So, we love Notion and really like it's just transformed our business. And on our kind of team meetings, they've got a little icon on her Notion board, all the different things have icons. And I think that I've noticed also helps you a little bit. Do you think so?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say this. The things that help dyslexics help everyone. So
Mm,
the having the little visuals. So we started this back in probably October because we had just what if dyslexia was easy awareness month. And we had so much work to do that our Notion boards were out of control. And I was like, I need to work on October stuff, but I can't find any of it. So having those little visual icons helped me, number one, see how much work I had to do, but number two, created little memory, like almost like stamps in my brain. I could see my Notion board in my head. Oh, these little icons. So yeah, that helps a ton with workflow and remembering things and making it visual. I will also say I love Google Sheets, Microsoft Excel, Apple numbers, like having just a place to put things and kind of whiteboard. I mean, we do so much in Excel or we build
mm,
tables in Notion. Like we had a great example. There was a few months ago, we had a ton of pot of reels coming out, and we have a member of the team who kills it and takes care of some of that for us. And they had just listed them. I was like, hey, give me some feedback on these reels. I need approval. And I went in to look at it and I was like, dear God, I cannot see this. I have no idea what I've looked at. I can't remember what I like did and didn't do. And so I just turned it into a little table and I was like, notes go here. And it visually organized things and it helped me remember what I had done and what I had not done. I guess it's like a two-part system, not just memory, but
No, you definitely put a lot more effort into the visual element of like our Notion that helps you remember things. Like, you put all of the when we got each month's got like a heading board and all of those kind of things. And you also put things in lots of sections as well. When I think about the other ways that we're kind of organizing things. So then again, I think it creates that snapshot for you that you can kind of pick up and remember like we might have key things or like all of the notes are written the same, all of that kind of stuff I think also really helps you, whereas I'm just like sitting on the other side, just passenger princess, just like yeah, whatever, yeah, okay, sounds great.
well, so the reason I actually started taking notes the exact same way for every meeting is because I knew it was going to help you when it came to remembering what we talked about in each meeting. We have these weekly one-on-ones. They're like a quick touch base for both of us. We like run through all those random items so that we're not, constantly emailing each other like, "Hey, did you get this email? Hey, have you done this yet?" Like we wait till Wednesdays or Thursdays and we run through all of them in like 20 minutes usually. So it doesn't disrupt workflow, but I kept it the same every week. That way, when we get into the meeting, everyone knows what to expect. And when you're going back to the meeting, okay, this was a to do. I can go look at it in like this section of the notes of this, weekly email. So it's more like an ease of search thing. And is it helping you?
Let's say yes.
It's helping
No,
you
I
when
was
you use it.
I was thinking of the monthly planning we do with like January and February and like that. I was thinking of it that way, and I find that really helpful to structure my thoughts, not to
Oh,
remember.
yeah, so the way we do monthly planning is we start with the like event topic and then we move into like a brain dump almost of like here's everything that we need to know. And then we move into planning the podcast, the social media, the newsletters, the things around that. So the whole idea is we start top of the big picture and then we drill down into the details. And by having it the same every month, your brain now, when you go into those meetings, knows where you're going to start and where you're going to end. So, yeah, that helps a lot.
Exactly. I mean, I don't like the rigidity, but I know that I need it. So, Katie, to leave everyone with a kind of one thing that you would recommend, what would be your kind of like quick actionable takeaway?
I'd say my number one, like, this is the thing you need to start today is live your life in stories. So this idea of actively kind of thinking about your life in the pieces of chunks, right? So it's not just I came into the house and I put down my keys. It's I came in and I was in a rush because I was trying to run and get dinner on the table. And like, I don't want to say have a narrator in your head because that's a little obnoxious, but create stories around the things that you're doing or that are important, and reframe them as quests, or find a more narrative way to think about
I
things you want to
literally did
remember.
that last night to find my keys. I came in last night and I came in from the theater and I was on the phone and I was like speaking on the phone and then I was like, and I was trying to look for my keys this morning and I was like, okay, you came in, you were really stressed, you were like, like had all those things in your hand and you were on the phone. Okay, so that means you will have gone into your room to put everything down, and because my keys weren't by the door, which is where they normally are, and that's exactly how I found them. So I back it. Great tip. I hope you're enjoying this episode. So, this month is all about memory, and we're going to be diving into lots of different ways to help you improve your memory. And so, if memory is a particular challenge for you and you relate to a lot of the things we're saying, then make sure you keep listening this month, particularly. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Dyslexia in Adults podcast. Whether or not this is your first listen or your 100th, I am so grateful that you decided to entrust me with this challenge. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could review and subscribe to the podcast because it really helps us to reach more people.